Kamen Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of, I almost said Q-Ranger episode 40, Ex-Aid episode 40. So, Pallad's back. I talked about last week how I was pretty sure that there was probably going to be something happening with that, and I was right, and lots of people gave good, responses about what they thought it would be. I think there was at least a couple that pretty much guessed it, having to do something with Mighty Brothers, which I actually don't know if it necessarily had anything to do with Mighty Brothers, other than that's how he, re-emerged. But yes, Ex-Aid did not kill Pallad. I'm not that surprised, and honestly, I'm not disappointed. I don't think it takes away from the impact of last week, especially because of the story reasons of why M did it, and also, the resolve in his personality made so much sense between when you bridge these two episodes together. And basically, it's funny, I mentioned a few weeks ago how Hiro and Taiga both had moments in the series where it was stand out to me, where I'm like, okay, that's their cool character moment that I like. And for Taiga, it was the episode where focused on him and Nico, with him talking about how I should be the one to fight because nobody cares. And then for Hiro, it was just a few weeks ago when he decided to let go of his fiance. And this, I think, was my moment for M, maybe, unless he does something later. I thought it was, because as annoyed as I am, anyway, I thought that was funny. I didn't mean to do it. But I think he's too overly goody-goody, and that's a weird thing to complain about because it's hard to articulate, but it's in an unrealistic way where it seems like it's, he's written that way, and it's not the way a real person that was that good would behave, if that makes any sense. But based on his motivation of, with the patients and, just being a doctor, I thought it was, and having had dealt with Pallad, I think it did make a lot of sense and was neat to sort of want to show Pallad, this is the fear people face, you should understand this, and then tying it to, this is why you should appreciate life, and then tying it to his connection with him. He's like, well, why would you do this? And he's like, well, the game disease is a part of me, you're basically an aspect of me. So I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a really cool, I almost want to say climax to this arc, but it's not over yet. I mean, the series. So there's probably going to be more to him and Pallad in the last batch of episodes here. But it was a good climax, at least to this part. That word is so weird for multiple levels because it makes you think of Deno, but then other things. But anyway. So yeah, I thought it was just well done, because Pallad has mostly been one of my favorites. There was a weird dip early on in his debut where he had this weird logic jump that made no sense to me. But for the most part, I've always liked him, because I kind of liked the anarchy he initially brought in, and I ended up really liking his storyline. That was one of the stories that got me back into the series, was because even though there's still a part of me that's a little disappointed that we didn't have the story of the good M being the bugster, I thought this story was a unique twist on the sort of standard writer has a monster inside of him story, like Blade or Gaim or O's, stuff like that, where it's actually a separate being, and it's still not the most original thing, but I think it's not done quite that way in Rider, and I think it's very interesting, and I think it created a very unique setup. So I thought this was a great way to go about it, and I honestly wasn't sure which way they were going to go with it. To be honest, if I would have guessed a couple weeks ago, I probably would have said they would have headed more in the Pallad would end up destroyed by the end of the series arc. And that could still happen. But I mean, in a battle with M, or something, because I don't know how, it depends on how they'd want to end it, if he would still be able to transform. But I just didn't necessarily expect a redemption story for him. And I think it worked, because they leaned on this episode a little bit on a concept I thought was super cool of basically, looking at the bugsters through the lens of that they're basically the video game enemies that we fight in video games. And I thought that was really cool. And something that bothered me was earlier on in the series was that I felt the villains just weren't as good in terms of, I really liked the Roymudes, because I think especially in the last arcs they did a good job of bringing out their humanity and sort of understanding their perspective and what they'd been through, and sort of that whole human versus Roymude relationship, the differences, similarities. And I think this arc with the Bugsters does that well, because especially with Pallad. I mean, you have other ones throughout the series, like the Burger Dude, and then obviously Poppy, that are good and more human. But Pallad wanting to be human like M because whether he wanted to admit it or not, he wanted to be like M and wanted to connect with them. But also just coming at it from the perspective of something that, I want to say relatable, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but of like, we fight NPCs all the time, and it's almost like a Black Mirror concept of like, what if the NPCs came out here and were like mad we were killing them? So my bottom line here, I got kind of rambly, sorry, is that I really like the concept of the villains being NPCs and using that. Admittedly, I do like that thing about Poppy, like, well, if there's no humans, who are we going to play games with? And I thought it was a really cool, deep explanation at the look between the relationship between us and the video game enemies we fight. And I think that's really cool, and it'll probably be one of the things I remember about the series, and I think it was all well done in terms of Pallad. In terms of the action stuff, Ex-Aid was out of it for a bit at the beginning because they thought he actually destroyed him, so they borrowed the Muteki Lockseed, God, wow, I'm messing up the sentence a lot, Gasat, to use like the 10-second version of Muteki's ability for pause. That didn't work out so well. It's kind of reckless, honestly, because he could have gotten his hands on it. We can't count on Laser to surprise him again. But then after it was revealed at the end, you know, that he could transform, it was a really neat team-up battle between Ex-Aid and Pallad, which had some really cool choreography, lots of fancy flips from Paradox in particular. I thought it was really well done. It was really neat to see, too, both. I think what really accentuated it was well, obviously the relationship between these two characters and them teaming up is kind of monumental in this way, but also the way that they've used the Mighty Brothers form as this sort of visual cue or tether or center of their relationship in a way. I think that was really cool, and I think made the form really cool in my eyes. Because like design-wise, like I love the ideas behind it, but it's not my favorite. But like the concept of like, oh, that one's M, that one's him, I thought was a really cool like core center visual cue for that dynamic. And I think for me it was like almost seeing like, oh, Mighty Brothers became Muteki and Paradox, if that made any sense. I don't know, I thought it was cool, like it just, especially since they opened up Pallad returning with Mighty Brothers, and I just thought that was neat. Good choreography. There was a cool moment at the end when they defeated him, they fist bumped. There was also a really cool moment where which I thought was really cool, not only just to use for Paradox to use an attack where we got to see the two halves of the original Paradox forms, because I love those suits a lot, but that was neat to see in general. But then that he used Perfect Puzzle's ability to basically counter Kronos using his ability to pull out an O-Metal case and use all the power-ups, and he basically countered that because of Perfect Puzzle's ability to rearrange them. This is him rearranging them. But I thought that was really cool. There was lots of cool stuff in the fight. And then at the end, I didn't really see this coming. The Gashat was destroyed. We got about 4 episodes left. I can't remember if it's 4 regular ones, 3 regular ones, but we only have a handful of episodes left. Less than is in the season of Game of Thrones from now on. And then there's going to be like, you know, the last one's probably going to be epilogue-y / build introduction. So we have even less real episodes. So, I wasn't exactly sure where they were going to go for the last batch. I kind of assumed Kronos would be defeated in this, at least mostly. I thought if anything, the threat would be over of like Nico getting better, and like maybe he'd find some other way to beat Kronos or something, kind of like with Ex-Aid. He didn't find another way, but you know what I mean. Or maybe you don't. But, and then I was like, okay, I'll probably do like Gemdis or something, or maybe some sort of surprise antagonist, like conflict that I'm not seeing. But I honestly didn't expect him to like bugster out or whatever the hell he did and like restart, which I thought was kind of neat, just because that's another video game thing, like just like pause. Like he reset it, rather, sorry, restarts are his other ability, but he reset it, and that's what you can do with the game. You're like, oh, I messed up, you know, I'll turn it off. I've had those moments where I played video games too long and I messed up working on something in real life, and I had that split second where I'm like, oh, I'll just revert to my last save, and I'm like, oh, this is real life. But so that was kind of neat. I'm interested to see where that's going. It could end up being like one of those things that only lasts one more episode, like it just prolonged Kronos for one more episode, or it could have him being there right up until the end or near the end. So I'm not sure, but we have a lot less ground to cover. Like, without that, this very well could have been almost a finale arc, given it's kind of a culmination of a lot of things. So I'm interested to see where the last four go. Speaking of Gemdis, he does make an appearance next week. So yeah, overall, good episode. I thought it was a great resolution to this conflict, or conflict storyline. And good setup, surprising setup, I think, for next week. So yeah, I'd probably give it an 8.5. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to lock, comment, and subscribe. Dawson Rider, signing out.